here we go, everybody. This is the newest episode of Losing Your Mind with Chris Cosentino. And I'm sitting here with Traci Des Jardin, who was my first boss when I moved to San Francisco in 1996. Traci whipped me into shape. She's been guiding me through this crazy industry that we talk about, I think, every other week.
Rather perplexing.
And Traci nicknamed me, probably, I say that was like the first or second day I think I was working at Rubicon.
I think it was fairly predictive, Chris.
It was one of the funnier moments at Rubicon when I started. I started the day it was a fancy food show.
Was it? Okay, that was always a complete insane couple of days.
Too much as a young cook being in the city, and that was when everybody showed up to town
from all over the country.
All over the country, every chef. That's okay. Traci's baking banana breads.
Yeah.
So, Traci, you set a precedent. I personally feel that you set a precedent as a young woman when you went in this industry. You went to Europe. You worked abroad. I mean, you fought your way to where you are today. And I think that is super inspiring for so many young women out there, but so many chefs, whether it's male or female, who were scared to travel abroad alone, who were afraid to work in those types of environments. You set a precedent, like you changed the dynamic.
Yeah, I think, I always say I was sort of young and dumb. I was 19 when I left for France and left California for the first time. And I had no idea what I was signing up for. But I was determined, no matter what it was that I was going to find on the other side, to make it work. And that's exactly what I did. And, some of it was really challenging and really difficult. Being in 4 different kitchens in France, being the only young woman amongst 25 young men, I was always the only woman. That certainly had its challenges. I chose, from a language perspective, to sort of understand the things that were important and to tune out the rest. And that's how I got through it. But it was also incredibly inspiring to be working, watching Pierre Toigreau work or Alain Sanderon. These are the legends of cuisine. And we didn't have those kinds of role models working in the United States at that point in time. We had a few. We had Jean-Louis Paladin was here, and certainly we had the legacy of André Saltner at Lattès and people like that. But it wasn't what it is today, where we had, a slew of Michelin 3-star restaurants in the United States.
So when you got to France, did you have set goals? Were you like, I'm going to work for this person, this person, this person? Did you have everything set in advance, or did you just kind of go with the flow and then just hope it led from one to the other?
It was a combination of the two. The first time I went, I had a stage set up already at Toigreau, and so I knew that was going to be what I was doing for, that was 8 months. And then after that, I started to poke around. I ended up with an opportunity in New York, went back to New York for a year and a half, and then returned to France for another stint, which I did have lined up at Alain Sanderon's Place de la Madeleine, Jesus Christ, restaurant. My brain is failing me.
We're all getting jello. In between those years, I think all of us are getting jello at this point.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, when you start to look at now how much easier it is for people to get over there, how much easier it is to communicate with chefs on the other side of the pond, right? It's just DM somebody in social media.
Right.
You had to go through writing letters in French, asking, waiting for responses, it's a totally different time when we start to compare those days. And even when I tried to go and stage in Europe, there was no cell phone, no direct communique. It was facsimiles.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, and you were also super isolated. You couldn't, sort of track what was happening back home. My brother was living in Mexico City when I lived in Paris, and literally letters would take 3 to 6 months to get from me to him if they arrived ever. Talking to your parents on the phone was, you maybe did it once every 6 weeks because it was super expensive and you didn't have a phone in your house. So you were really, really isolated, and, that communication, yes, acquiring the jobs, but also you were on your own on an island in, the middle of nowhere, basically. And, if you didn't have the language and you didn't have friends, you were completely, on your own doing this thing, which, made me hyper-focused and, was kind of a get her done, you know. It was just like, you know, I was really steadfast in what I wanted to learn, and I felt like it was really the only place I could be doing that particular thing at that point in time, which I think is true. And I was determined, and that's, you know, all the negative part of it, I overlooked and just head down and getting everything I could out of the experience.
So you've now, you did that, you came back, you opened Patina in LA, you've run Rubicon, you've had Jardinier, you've had multiple properties, great success, rising star, you've had James Beard Awards, you've had Food and Wine. Like, from those points till now, like, you've had so many experiences. What is your favorite? Like, what has been the most for you? Not awards, but just moment that meant the most to you from all those experiences.
I mean, there's so many. I think that, you know, what it really distills down to, I think, are the relationships that you build, the relationships that I have with people like you, seeing people who've worked for me step into their own success. You know, I'm deflecting a little bit, but, you know, it really truly is the most satisfying point in my career, is sort of seeing the elevation of others and their opportunities. Yeah, you know, I mean, running a restaurant, I just closed Jardinier after 21 years, having that kind of, I'm very proud of the fact that I had that kind of run and was able to open it gracefully and close it gracefully, which is really difficult. I had never closed a restaurant before, which is really interesting because I've opened, you know, probably between 15 and 20 restaurants in my career, in some, you know, in some capacity, obviously not as the chef owner, but been participated in an opening. So closing one down was a new experience, and you know, a really, really interesting one that, you know, I've embraced as a process and something that I can talk about and kind of put out there in the world as, you know, a how-to in you know, probably not the most pleasant thing for anybody, but you know, certainly an important factor in what we do, because nothing lasts forever, and we're going to have, you know, closures as much as we do have openings. So
it's I think it's an interesting time. I mean, you've seen so much change in the business, right? You've inspired me to think, to, you know, when we went and cooked in the jails together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which
amazing,
I was
right?
So scared to do that. I'll never forget being petrified. I kind of got bullied into that one that day by my wife. As I didn't want to go into the jail. I was always afraid I was going to end up in one, let alone I was going to walk into one voluntarily. But I think you've given back so much, and I think that's a big part of what we are in this industry. We're the hospitality business. We want to feed people. We want to make people smile. And I think that you've set a precedent in that. You've done that since day one. Do you see that continuing? Do you see it changing? Do you see it evolving?
Well, I certainly hope it's my legacy. I mean, you know, I have to tell you a story. I went to Aspen Food and Wine this last weekend, and I had the opportunity through the American Express Trade Program to not only speak on a panel about leadership and diversity in restaurants, which I think is having its important moment, but we'll get to that. I had the opportunity to travel with two of our participants from La Cocina. One who's just starting out. She doesn't even have her own catering business yet. She has been a housekeeper and nanny in San Francisco for the last 30 years. She's from Oaxaca. I fell in love with her. You know, I got to spend 4 days with her in Aspen. And just at the very start of her career, she's in her early 50s and has raised, you know, numerous children in San Francisco and has a passion for cooking. And she's starting out her own catering business. So amazing. Oaxaca, Rosa from Oaxaca. And then Hina Patel, who has Besharam, which is in the Minnesota Street Project here in San Francisco. We had an opportunity to go to Aspen together and do a reception for La Cocina in Aspen Food and Wine for the American Express Trade Program. And it was such an incredible experience because these women got to see that world that I think, you know, we're accustomed to now and we're so entrenched in. And I think, you know, can we say the word jaded? You know,
I think that's a really valid word to
yeah.
say.
And, we kind of, I think, I'm going to call out my colleagues a little bit here. I think that we call it in a little bit. We go to these places and we're cooking and we've done these food and wine festivals or these dinners or whatever. And, do we really think about how special that might be for somebody? It's lost the luster maybe for us. But seeing it through their eyes is sort of like taking, somebody to Paris who's never been there and going through that process or some place that you love that you're sharing with someone that you love and care about for the first time. That's what it was like. And, it was a moment for them in time that was just so incredibly special. And we had, many, many teary moments where they told me how much they appreciated being there. And they got to meet Ruth Reichel and, all the stars of food and, Ming Tsai and Gail Simmons and, everybody that goes to Aspen. A lot of those folks came to the reception and said that the food was the best food that they'd had in Aspen. And, these women were really putting their heart into the food that they were making there because it was such a special moment for them. So, note to self, let's not get too jaded and not care about, what we're doing or understand sort of the wonder of it. Because, we have a lot of opportunities and a lot of really cool stuff that we get to do. And I think sometimes we forget to appreciate it.
I think that's really, really important in a time where there's so many things going on. There's so many people who need guidance and so many people who need help in a time where you're right. A lot of people take it for granted. We see it every day.
Yeah. And you know what? At the end of the day, even though people think chefs are, super, super rich, most of us aren't. I know You're not, Chris. I'm not. But, we do pretty well. We're probably 1%ers, like on the scale. We have an opportunity to pull other people up. And that really is my most gratifying work in sort of I'm going to say the last 10 years of my career, because that's kind of the way I'm heading, I think. Hopefully I'm 53 and I hope that, by the time I'm 63, I'm not running restaurants anymore. We'll see. But
I can't see you not running a restaurant.
Well, I'll be doing something.
It's hard for me to see that. Don't.
It might be a beach restaurant in Mexico.
Okay, I'm down with that.
Yeah, exactly. It will be something. I'm not going to sit on my high knee, but what I'm doing today is probably not going to be what I'm doing in 10, 15 years. So
of course, everybody evolves, and I think you've seen the evolvement of food in San Francisco. You've been with the opening of Rubicon.
Yeah.
Right? And that has been, I think Rubicon, if you really take a look at the family tree that came out of Rubicon, your family tree is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
The people that have come out of working with you, the list is endless. And I think, people don't, when you start to do those family trees, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And that's really the stuff that matters to me, right? That I feel like I was able to influence, teach, spawn, these people who've gone out into the world to do amazing things. I certainly didn't, teach like, Larry Stone. Like the fact that I got to work with Larry Stone for 3 years on such an intimate level, and I learned so much from that man. What an incredible mind and palate and,
Unreal,
an
right?
inspiration. Yeah. And, so those, also are the moments for me. Drew Nieporent, amazing. I worked for him 2 years at Montrachet and 5 years at 3 years at Rubicon. And, also just, old school, maitre d' front of house guy who really ran a dining room, and so much of that stuff is mechanized now, right? And that was all in his head. It's like the open table, matrix was in that man's head.
It's still amazing to think about all those moving pieces, and really, it's like when I got to Rubicon, it was you, Paul Arenstam, Scotty Newman, Elizabeth Faulkner, Richard Reddington, Robbie Lewis. Who else was on the line at that point?
Oh my God,
Paul Lemieux. Paul Lemieux was there.
Yeah.
Paul Lemieux was the one who brought me in from culinary school.
That's right.
And I think about those times and like who was there and what was going on and how we were pushed. And it was such an intense, amazing, inspiring environment. Like,
every person was excellent. and so, you're working.
And if you weren't, you were pushed to get excellent
right.
pretty damn quick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, powerhouse of culinary talent, just, unbelievable. I think back on those days, and, we don't see that kind of talent come to us anymore. And, that's a challenge in our business. We're not seeing the same quality of people come through. Maybe the top kitchens are, I don't know, but, at the end at Jardiniere, I was certainly not seeing, that quality of people come through to want to work. I mean, I saw a lot of young kids who said, wow, they spend a day in the kitchen and say, this is really hard work. And my response was, what, you think?
This is really not that hard today. You're trailing on Monday. Wait till you see Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's an interesting dynamic when you start to talk about staffing comparative to that. I mean, it was a multiple interview, cook something to get the jobs situation. Right. We were fighting for the jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it's like, if you show up and you have a heartbeat, you got a job.
Yeah. It's like, do you own your own knives? No. Okay. Well, we have some that you can use. And it's like back then, it's like, if you didn't have your own gear, you had to be ready to rock and roll. And I think we also have a dynamic. Switch the whole parameters. We went from a pretty male dominant, which you trained in, worked in, male dominant restaurant industry, and it still is pretty male dominant. Pretty male dominant.
Yeah.
And I've been talking with a lot of people, and there's been the conversations of, why don't we see more women chef entrepreneurs? Why don't we see more women chefs getting notoriety? And there's been a huge change with the Me Too movement and, inclusion of race, color, creed. And I think it's been pretty amazing to see this change. But one of the things that a woman said to me the other day, she goes, I think that men are more apt to say yes to something if they're not ready to do it. But women have more thought process. They think it through, and they want to make sure they're 95% ready before they say yes to do something different.
Right. They reflect back and assess themselves.
Want to make sure it's
accurately.
Correct. Like I recall when I started making boccolone, it was a really funny conversation you and I had, and you said, "Why is it that all the boys want to make sausage and all the women want to make cheese?" Remember that?
Yeah.
And I thought that conversation with that young lady was really, really thought-provoking, because I was sitting in a women's group that was talking about, like, why don't they jump at more opportunity?
Right.
And I was pretty impressed by that answer, because it's a very well thought out, accurate answer. It's like, yeah, that does make sense. Men are more reactive, or women think it through.
Yeah. We've been having these conversations for 3 decades about the why of why are these numbers askew? Why are we is it still 90% male? Lack of diversity. I'm sort of taking a different approach to this today. Like, I don't care about the why anymore. We have to make it different going forward, and whatever that takes. Like, you better look as a business owner at your matrix, and if you don't have 40% women and some amount of diversity, figure out why systemically in your organization, because I made excuses to myself for a long time about that. I really I think I didn't force the change. I think that I wanted the best candidate for the job, and the best candidate was usually a white male, and I'm mad about that. I'm mad that I sort of let that slide by, because it's not okay. We have to compensate, because there are so many reasons why, women, girls are raised differently. People who, come from a different ethnic background are treated differently from the time they're children. And so the whys are so complex, and they go back to the beginning of whatever a person's life. If we don't force that change now to make sure that we are welcoming that diversity in the matrix of our workforce, it's never going to change. And the why doesn't matter. The why doesn't matter. We have to force change. We have to make it so. We have to change what the whole looks like, so to speak, and make sure that we are able to put the right person in that spot and make them successful. And so, whatever that takes, that's what I'm committed to now. I'm tired of asking ourselves why. It hasn't worked and it hasn't changed enough.
Yeah, and it's, we see it at the restaurants when we put the application process out, right? It's, it's few and far between applicants anymore at all, let alone, male or female, Latino, non-Latino, Asian, it doesn't matter anymore. Right. There's just few and far between.
Right.
And, what is it that's going to make that change? I mean, is it compensation? Is it education? Is it benefits? What is it that's going to bring the individuals in?
Well, this phenomena, because you ran, a restaurant for a long time, and you'll sort of see, your Latin, amazing butcher or prep cook. And for whatever reason, they don't want to ascend onto the line, and
yes.
And those reasons are multifaceted, right? We could try to drill down and say, why, but it doesn't really matter. What really matters is our ability as mentors, as leaders, to take that person and say, I don't care what the why is of why you don't feel like this is your spot at the top of the tier on the cook line or as a sous chef or a CDC. I'm going to make it so that you've got everything you need to get up there. And that's the difference, how I'm feeling today as how I felt 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I didn't feel like that was my job to make that so. I felt like it was my job to make sure that I had the best kitchen possible. And that usually was a white dude, and I don't feel like that's okay anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been we've had guys that have come in, started as dishwashers, pushed from dishwasher to prep, from prep to the line. And we now, it's an educational process. That's how I started.
Right.
I started as a dishwasher.
Right.
And to me, I think then that individual has respect for the dishwashing team. It builds camaraderie. It builds the whole thing across. And it's been hard to find people that do want to move up. Like you said,
right.
I have a gentleman who works for me right now, speaks perfect. His English is exceptional. I've offered English classes to all my guys.
Right.
Do you want to go?
And that makes a big difference. It does, it does make a difference, but it doesn't solve the problem.
No. And I said, well, what else a lot of them work 2 jobs, so they feel that they don't have the time or the responsibility to be able to handle both. I've heard a million different answers to the question, and setting them up for success has always been my goal.
Yeah.
And it's a hard road to travel, and you take on a lot to make sure that these people have the opportunity that they need, whether it's men, women, Latino, non-Latino, Asian. I don't care who you are or what you do.
Right.
I just want you to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. But, through the work through La Cocina, which intimately, we have provided an institution now that can help women, immigrant women who from low socioeconomic, backgrounds, who don't have an education, who don't have a business background, to realize their dreams and passion around food and create their own businesses. And it's like the most inspiring stuff that I've done in my career, honestly.
So let's talk a little bit about that and La Cocina, and how many people go through that program, and a little bit about how it's funded, so people that are listening to this can help.
Jump in. Yeah.
Yeah. Jump in, see what's going on. I've seen a lot of cool people come out of there, a lot of really interesting projects that you've worked on with those individuals there. And I think it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
So La Cocina is a business incubator. We seek out mostly immigrant and low income women, although that's not absolutely exclusive. We do allow men into the program sometimes. We do allow people who have, bigger business resources, commercial kitchen space. But for the most part, the people that we vet and allow into the program are low income immigrant women. And they're starting out their own food businesses. And, the original concept was, the tamale lady who has an informal business selling tamales on the street and makes them in her home kitchen. That was the inspiration for the organization. And it is almost 15 years old. And we don't have the exact numbers of businesses that cycle through in a fixed period of time, because because we allow people to sort of grow as is their natural pace. And so, if they are just starting out as a caterer and have never worked in a commercial kitchen, then, they might take a little bit longer than somebody who's been working as a caterer for 10 years but wants to formalize their business and grow it. So we have to run the gamut of people who have really developed businesses and business ideas to people who are really just starting out with a dream of commercializing their salsas or whatever it might be. So we have graduated a bunch of people into brick and mortar businesses, restaurants, catering. We now have one Food and Wine Best New Chef. We have had James Beard nominees now. I mean, it's just incredible what the organization has done and how far we've come in 15 years. And it's just really inspiring work.
That's awesome. I think that to me now is really ultimately how can, like you said earlier, how can we give back in a bigger way?
Yeah.
It's really, it's been...
Yeah, and I think that you were talking about the changes in our industry. I'm trying to find that kind of personal satisfaction because we got into this business because we had a passion to cook. We didn't know that we were going to become so-called celebrities. I still am just taking.
I hate that word.
I know, I'm taken aback when people call me a celebrity, and when they sort of respond to me based on having seen me on TV. I'll never be comfortable with that, but I'll take it because it does give us leverage in our ability to raise money for organizations like La Cocina. That's one of the silver lining for me. I personally am not somebody that loves, that idea of walking down the street and being recognizable. Never have. But, it is where I am. And so I accept it as part of what we are today. But, I'm still looking for the deeper meaning because I didn't get into this to become famous. I got into it because I had a passion for cooking, and it's become so much more. Now you have to be, you have to run a podcast. You have to be, adept at...
That was a choice. I wanted to give a voice, and I think that's why I chose to do the podcast, was to give a voice. And I think you have a lot to share, and this is why I wanted to sit down and talk with you, because you're preaching to the choir here right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really, it is an awkward moment when you walk down the street.
Yeah.
It really is. And people are like, oh my God, were you on... I'm like, no. That's why I always answer. I'm like, oh, hi, Bobby Flay. Nice to meet you.
Someone said to me the other day, I was at the gym working out, sweating, like after a half an hour on a bike and, lifting weights. And this woman looks over at me and says, does anyone tell you that you look like Traci Des Jardin? And I was like, I am Traci Des Jardin. Yeah. And she's like, what? So it was just, those moments happen and they always throw me.
It's a weird thing. I mean, we stuck our neck out there. Let's be honest. Like, we're the ones who stretched our neck out really far. We went on, both of us, we've both done Iron Chef.
The next Iron Chef. The worst chef. That was just unbelievable.
That was so brutal. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That was so brutal. What was the kitchen that day when we were doing pastry? 125 degrees?
125 degrees. I've never poured sweat out of my clogs before, but that day I did. I poured sweat out of my shoes.
Was so brutal. But I think about like all those things we stretch our neck out there. We do it because we think it's good for our businesses.
Yeah.
And it has alternate repercussions.
Yeah.
Right? There's other things that come along with it. And I think...
Well, you've been through a lot, as far as that goes.
Yeah. I try not to dwell on those things anymore. I try to move on to the next and be in the moment and focus more on, how to make a bigger impact and make the change, and I think that, like you said, you're working with La Cocina. I try to do as much work as I can with No Kid Hungry and Chef Cycle and getting food in kids' hands in need. And I think it's times to change.
Yeah, and then there's the environment, which is something that, I'm also super focused on. I don't know what form it'll take at this point in time, but, we have kids, you have a young boy who's 14 now? 14. I've got a 19-year-old. There are doomsayers that say by 2050, this planet's not going to be inhabitable anymore. So that's super scary because that's actually our children's lifetime. I can't imagine that it's that soon, but it could be. We need to pay attention to a lot of things. One of the things I'm super obsessed with right now is plastics. If as an industry we can do something to address that, because, the rolls and rolls of plastic film and disposable delis that we use because we don't have another thing to use is just like, right now I'm obsessed with it. I just can't even fathom like how we're going to fix that, but it needs to be fixed, and we're doers. So
I mean, how much you hear all these things, and it's like, what is the next thing we can focus on? And it's almost like there's so much we've been taken. How do I word this in the best way? Like, the other day somebody said to me, how much time do you actually get to cook?
Right.
And I try to explain to the younger generation. Everybody's like, man, I want your job. And I'm like, no, you don't.
No.
Relish in those moments when you're on the line.
Yeah, when you get to cook every day. That's the best.
Every day. And it's the best, because those are when you don't have to worry, like cooking. It's like, okay, if you didn't mise your station, that's on you. And that's the only thing you got to worry about is mising your station and getting ready for service. Like, that was those moments. Like, I always kept saying to myself as a young cook, I can't wait to be there. I'm pushing for that. And then you get there and you're like, man, why don't I get to cook anymore?
Yeah, and the things that we have to do today, as the people that we are in our industry, are just so diverse. I feel like my brain is like, and I have a really, good ability to focus and organize myself, but I feel like my brain's a scrambled egg most of the time. It's because I'm doing so many different things, and I relish the tasks of like something that I can start and finish. Like, I love cleaning because I can just, I can start the process and finish it. And there's
completion, completion
exactly.
of a task.
My email is not like that.
No. I laughed about that the other day, but it's a really, really valid point. Like, we try to find things that we can complete from start to finish because we can't get everything done that we're really supposed to do every day, because we're trained from the beginning when we started cooking. There's an end to the means. We have to mise en place for service, and that's as a start and finish of a dish, and it's getting it out in a timely manner to the guest. But our life isn't like that anymore.
No, it's all these loose ends, and they just drive me crazy. I mean, it's like so many, and we have to be so many different things. Personalities, we have to go on TV. We have to still create food. We have to train and inspire our teams. I mean, it's so multifaceted, and it's difficult. It's we don't have the business training. We are not joiners by nature. We don't share information very well. I mean, if you look at the personality type of chefs, I mean, we're kind of lone wolf, and we don't know how to ask for help. It's an interesting world.
And I think it's gotten a lot better. I think there's been a lot. There has been no mentorship of business.
Right.
There's been no mentorship for opening your own restaurant. It's been a situation where mentors have been, I'm going to train you how to cook.
Right.
I'm going to give you technique. And that's where it stopped in our industry. We didn't have anybody to show us how to read a contract, how to not get hosed.
Right.
And I think now the great part about the business is I feel like we can reach out to each other and say, hey, who do you work with? Who's this? And do you know this? And I've never done this before. And I've been asked to do an airport contract. Tell me about your contract. And,
right.
We have to learn to communicate better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
share information.
Ask
for help.
And I think that's some ways getting better, but I think in the current economic state, it's getting harder because people are afraid to share information, because they're going to lose an opportunity or lose a staff member or lose an edge over the next individual. And you see that a lot now.
You see that in some personalities. I mean, I'll tell anyone anything. I mean, obviously there's, confidentiality in contracts and that kind of stuff. But, if it comes to somebody that I care about, I'll give them any information that they need. And it's important, it's an important aspect of what we do. I tell young people that I meet all the time that are, getting their best new chef, accolades or whatever. I'm like, give them my card and I say, call me. When you're negotiating a contract and you need to understand like how this works, if you need a good lawyer, if you need business advice, reach out, please. And most of them don't, unfortunately. But I think that's another way that we can give back is to share the information and the experiences that we've had.
I mean, you've been instrumental for me. You've always
you.
been there. You've been there when I went pear-shaped. You've been there when, things were hard at the restaurant and I was learning something. You've always pushed me, made sure the keel was at least turning in the right direction, and I didn't go into the tornado or the hurricane, and it's been, for me, like, I can't even thank you enough. It's like, and I think there's so much that you have to offer this industry, and so much that people have to learn to ask.
Yeah, that's right.
Reach out to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how we can pay it forward. And I can't say that we can ensure the legacy of our work. But that's what I like to think about. I think, the restaurant business is in a pivotal, little strange position right now where we are at this tipping point where the business model doesn't make sense. I personally think that, we need smarter business people to upright it, to help us figure out, obviously with the knowledge base that we have, to interface with us to figure out how to fix a model that is badly broken. Otherwise, the restaurants that we've worked in and the experiences that we've had are going to not continue to exist. And maybe maybe there's no market for it. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe we really are dinosaurs and it's going a different way. But, whatever's the vestiges of what's left of the businesses that we've participated in and learned in, if there's some opportunity for the future for those to exist as they do, I want to ensure that as best as possible. But, the financial model's broken. You even see, the biggest players in our industry are closing restaurants left and right. And it's a big concern. I don't know where it's all going. It seems to be, secondary markets seem to be the place to be, and people are successful because one thing that food TV's done is made everybody a foodie, and people aspire to go to nice restaurants, whether they've ever been to one in their life or not. They've seen it on TV, and, we've created a market that is everywhere now, which is interesting. And I think it opens up a lot of opportunity, but what we're seeing in dense cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles now are just too many restaurants. There are too many options. And, restaurants that are wildly popular with all the accolades, Michelin stars even, open, they're busy for a year and a half, and a year and a half down the road, they're gone. And, maybe that is what we have to accept as the way of the future. I don't know. But
I think it's, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier: bad contracts, bad business models,
bad leases,
not understanding how to run the business properly. And did they ever really make a profit?
Right.
Were they ever breaking even, or was it just a situation where let's get the awards and then let's move on? And I think,
all the restaurants that I've opened have started to make money, literally. Obviously not making back the initial capital, but profitability on a month-to-month basis in the second month of business.
It has to.
Yeah, it has to. Otherwise, you're in trouble really quickly.
And I think that's become, I was never trained on P&Ls. I was never trained on all those things. And those are all, hard learned lessons that you put your head down and it's like, okay, I went to business school as part of culinary school, but nobody really guided me through those things.
Yeah.
And that's a whole new learning curve when you start reading those every month.
That's right.
We do a P&L every week.
Yeah, you have to. You got to keep, as Drew Nieporn always said, it's a nickel and dime business. And he wasn't wrong.
He's not wrong. No, he's not at all. What do you see now as the change? What do you see now as the moving forward in our industry? Not only just the fact that it is a broken system.
Yeah, I do think that we need to change how we do business, and I don't know what that means. Obviously the labor dollars are getting more and more expensive, and that has an impact on, that profit and loss, that bottom line. And that part of it needs to be, for me, let's just say at the end of the 21 years of Jardiniere, to be making the same amount of money I was making in the beginning part, I would have to have been charging double what I was charging. So, I basically just absorbed those losses, over that 21-year span, and didn't increase the prices to the consumer. Now, I don't think the consumer would have paid twice what they were paying. So, that wasn't the solution. Otherwise, I would have just done it. But it just illustrates the problem, which is, mostly it's the labor costs that went up and became that, huge impact on profitability. And, I believe 500% in living wage and $15.50 minimum wage. I mean, there's no question that, that doesn't even begin to chip away at what it costs to live in San Francisco. We have lots and lots of problems with those profit models. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, maybe it is, it's something that we can't even see. And I think that's where, people from other industries can help us with some insight into something that we are so entrenched in, we can't see the light.
The other day I was talking with a couple folks, and if you look 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the cost of food in a restaurant hasn't really increased that much.
No, I know. And not like a car or a house. I mean, like if you look at the housing costs.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, I bought a house in San Francisco in 1994. It's worth, 4 times what I bought it for.
Exactly. And I think people don't realize that we pay the least per capita for our food in the world.
Right.
Because of subsidies.
Right.
Subsidies control costs across the board. So if they're doing corn, soy, wheat, that affects meat, that affects everything. But at the same time, the cost of food has increased for us to purchase. It hasn't stayed low.
Right.
So we've basically been taking it in the shorts.
Yep.
For the past 15 years as cost of our goods have gone up, not just labor.
Right.
But, now there's delivery fees on every delivery. There's all these things that get rolled in to our everyday life.
To compensate everybody else for their increase in costs, but we just absorbed it.
We absorb it as a business, and we can't pass those costs on because perception of food is that it should be inexpensive, yet you go anywhere else in the world.
And it's very expensive.
It's very expensive. So it creates an interesting dynamic as a restaurant and owning a restaurant, running a restaurant. How do you balance that?
Right.
Do we get a lesser quality product to pass on to the guests, which you and I would never do?
Right.
Or what we have seen is the minimization of portions over the years.
Right.
To accommodate for.
Which is good. I mean, Americans have always eaten too much.
But then you get the complaint that there's too little on the plate for too much. So there's this balance. Which road do we take?
Yeah.
And it's a hard road to take.
Yeah, it's not clear. I mean, the path forward is not clear. I'm relying on people who are smarter than me to figure it out.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely not that smart. I know that, and I'm very comfortable with recognizing I know what road I belong in. And
Stay in your lane.
Stay in my lane. I'm staying in my lane right now. And we have to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's next.
No, I know. I think, but there's no doubt that the restaurant business and chefs and the world of food has become a beloved part of the American culture. And we can thank, food TV for that. So, I think that there's hope. There's certainly a market there. But how do we navigate that is the question.
Yeah. That's a true question. All right. So you have a busy day ahead of you. I've got to go. We all have busy days. So I'm going to ask a few quick things. Red or white wine?
White.
Beer or tequila?
Tequila.
I knew that. Tacos or hamburgers?
Tacos.
Okay. Pepperoni or cheese?
Cheese.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
I like a classic.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Nigiri or sashimi?
Nigiri. I love rice.
Okay. Uni or caviar?
Ooh, that's a tough one. How about both?
There is no wrong answer here. It's whatever you like.
Yeah.
Okay, so dry aged or not dry aged?
Dry aged.
It's funny. I've actually had people say they don't like dry aged because of the difference.
Old wine or young wine? I'll take young wine.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
I just, I appreciate, I mean, I think that, it's kind of probably a little bit like salami. You can't really tell what the trajectory of it is as you age it, right? You know, like fresh sausages versus the salami. You put that in the casing and you're sort of, hope and a prayer, right? And,
yes. Oh, I know all about that.
Right. And you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think the same, yes, there are predictives in what's going to happen to a wine, but, I've had the privilege of tasting a lot of wines up to, 100 years old. And it's interesting, but it's not necessarily what I want to drink.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love you, Traci.
Love you too, Chris. Very proud of you. You're amazing.
I wouldn't go that far. I feel like I'm holding on by the tips of my fingernails.
We all do.
Thank you for always being there and guiding me in the right direction and being a figure to look to and to ask for help and show me the right way.
Hopefully I'll always be here.
You will.
Okay.
I know you will. Thank you for doing this. I know you got a busy day.
All right.
I really appreciate it. So
my pleasure.
You're the best.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. I hope that worked for you.